On August 7th, Mars enters Libra and creates one of the most intense transits of the entire month, my friends, and that is a grand air trine between Pluto and Uranus, and we also have an opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Now, in my August forecast, I did talk about this transit in detail, and today we're going to explore this a little bit further. As many of you know, my monthlies are pretty jam-packed, but I do love to make individual videos on most of the transits that I do talk about in my monthlies, and this is definitely one of them that is on my list, that has been on my list, and I've been tracking all of the Mars transits for months and months and months, and actually have been waiting for this moment, my friends, because this grand air trine does, in fact, spark and trigger something in the collective for sure. But in our own life, I've been waiting to see how this would actually become a part of the story involving these outer planet shifts in all of our lives. And honestly, because I'm me, I can only really look at my own astrology to kind of navigate my own personal experience with this all. So for all of us out there, we have to understand that Mars has literally been ruling our lives for the last almost a year now. Mars entered Cancer, by the way, like last September, okay? And we had that massive Mars retrograde cycle over the winter. And we literally sort of just concluded that story when Mars entered Virgo about a month or so ago. And now we are almost done with that Mars and Virgo transit. And by the time you're watching this video, I'm sure Mars is still in Virgo. But on August 7th, which is not too far away from the launch of this video, Mars will have made it to its second zodiac sign since its insane Mars in Cancer, Mars in Leo transit. Now, the reason why Mars in Libra is so important right now in this point in time, in this point in history, is because history is literally being made right now. All of these outer planets are telling a cosmic story of human life as we know it. And Pluto in Aquarius has always transformed the consciousness of the grand leaps forward that humans have always embarked upon next. Second in line to Pluto in Aquarius, transforming the way that humans operate in this world, is Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini is all about tech, communication. We are talking about mental linguistics. We are talking about mental back and forths, mental processes, and anything that has to do with the stimulation of things mental. And we are definitely in a moment right now where we are in a massive technological boom. We are in a world that is ever changing in an information space. Some call this era of time the information age. And yes, the New Agers out there want to talk about the age of Aquarius. Sure, we can talk about the age of Aquarius until we're blue in the face. But until whatever this age of Aquarius actually is, which really, in my opinion, right now, we're in the age of Pluto in Aquarius during an information tech boom, which is putting us into a position of questioning, what does it actually mean to be a human? With AI and with all of the things that are unfolding in this world, what are these outer planets really representing right now? And how is this Mars and Libra story playing into it for the month of August? Now, I'm not saying that this transit has anything to do on the grand macro scale of what is going on in the world 110%, even though all these planets are always painting a picture of what's going on in the world 110%. But in reality, we are going to let the outer planets do what they're going to do. I mean, we're talking about years and years and years of world building, society shifts, or societal shifts rather. But in this moment in time, we need to examine, like, okay, well, what does this grand air trine have to do with things going on in the world right now? Like, what is relevant that is unfolding in the world right now in August 2025? What can we look at and observe reality? What kind of glasses can we put on, if you will, and observe reality through, involving what a Mars and Libra archetype can bring into the picture right now with a grand air trine and an opposition going to Aries. Now, Mars in Libra Mars is in exile in Libra. Mars rules Aries, where Saturn and Neptune are transiting. Mars is somehow having a communication with them in a really big way, because not only does Mars rule the sign, but Mars is also going opposite Saturn and Neptune, at least in these early days in where Mars will be in Libra. So we have that going on. But Mars is not in a place of strength, all things considered. Mars really does not have the dignity to be in a place of strength. Mars has dignity in Scorpio, because Mars also rules Scorpio in ancient astrology, and Mars rules Aries. So when Mars is in exile, okay, we're talking about a Mars that doesn't really have the ability to fully exert itself and to cause the kind of damage that Mars typically would cause while in Scorpio or Aries. And when I say damage, take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not really necessarily totally referring to conflict, rage, assertiveness in kind of more of a negative way, or war, because obviously we know right now war is front and center in a lot of things going on in the world. But in my opinion, I feel that Mars in Libra right now can totally have a opposite effect involving the escalations of war. I think right now Mars in Libra may actually, in fact, bring more negotiations and more things to the table involving diplomacy and finding ways to maybe reconcile some of the conflicts going on in the world, in my opinion. Now, I do think Mars in Libra wants to bring justice to the table. I think Mars in Libra wants to find fairness where it can. I think Mars in Libra definitely has difficulty asserting its will. But at the same time, I think actions become more strategic in Libra than they do impulsive. And that's something we need to really take a note of here. Mars in Scorpio can be very impulsive. Mars in Aries can be very impulsive, okay? We're talking about Mars getting the flame turned on. Mars having this impulse to want to just take over and do. Where Mars in Libra doesn't really have that, in my opinion. Mars in Libra is a little bit different. Libra is about balance, fairness. Yes, it's about social stuff as well. It is about making things good, harmonizing. It is ruled by Venus, right? Venus rules Libra. So just think about Mars transiting in a Venus-ruled sign. Technically, it's a little bit calmer, in my opinion. Now, I know there's a lot of astrologers out there who are still looking to this Mars and Libra transit because of the grand air trine and because of the oppositions to Neptune and Saturn as still being something very aggressive, something that could be very detrimental. And in our own life, I promise you, my friends, this stuff is not going to harm you. This is only going to benefit, I think, whatever we've been navigating currently this summer through all of these new shifts from Saturn and Neptune and Aries, and of course Uranus being fresh into Gemini right now. I think this Mars moment in Libra is actually going to provide some of the added boost we need in a cognitive sense to get things moving in the direction that we actually want to. And that's what I'm thinking about on the world stage too, my friends. I think this is actually a moment for a surge of diplomacy, a surge of activism, a surge of how can we make things better now? So I'm not saying that kind of energy can't be aggressive or violent even perhaps sometimes in the world. But what I'm saying is the intentions behind the Martian are coming from a place, I think, of good. The Martian tendency in Libra, even if in exile, is to make things better, in my opinion. Now, when we talk about the grand air trine and we're talking about Gemini with Uranus there, high mental clarity or brilliance, Mars allowing a sextile via opportunity, or a trine rather. Mars trining Uranus in Gemini is allowing this high mental clarity and brilliance to somehow kick online. So wherever Libra is in your birth chart, and please share with me where Libra is in your birth chart, guys, this is kind of where we might get a jolt of high mental clarity and brilliance in a way, where strategic matters become more in tune with our consciousness, and we learn how to solve maybe a problem or two in the Libra part of our life, And I think driving changes through balance and aesthetics is very important to note here. Balance, because I think we're all looking for a little bit of balance right now in our life. And I think the Libra part of our life definitely can use a little bit more pep in its step, right? So looking forward to Mars really adding some extra energy and flame there, if you will. And I think the balance from the grand air trine can provide that. Whatever Pluto is doing in Aquarius for you and whatever Uranus in Gemini has started to unfold for you, now just add Libra into the mix right now. Okay. And yes, we can still talk about Aries, of course, with Mars going opposite there, but just from the favorable aspects alone, like let's leave Saturn and Neptune out of this for a minute. We are talking about trines, favorable, harmonious flows of energy from element to element. We are talking about Mars being in Libra, a cardinal air sign. Okay. So this is very initiating. So we're dealing with cardinal energy, initiating, but also the supportiveness to the mutable chaos of Uranus and Gemini and the support from Pluto in Aquarius. So that is really important to note, guys, because Mars, I think, is in a place of, yes, let's start this now. Yes, let's make things more balanced and fair. Let's figure out a way to do this diplomatically. Let's figure out a way to really articulate what we want to say. How do we radically transform the other parts of our lives that are really in motion in a very new way? I mean, Uranus just entered Gemini, so that energy is very, very new for us, right? Pluto in Aquarius, technically just still getting started. We are still all trying to navigate what Pluto in Aquarius actually means for us in our life. And having this Mars in Libra moment with the other, the connection to Uranus and the connection, of course, to Pluto, this is really where we are jump-starting something really, really big. And I think this is actually one of the most perfect moments to have Mars be after everywhere else Mars has been. And I think we really need to get honest with ourselves when we talk about Mars transits, because sometimes Mars in certain places can really affect us in a lot different, in many other different ways that could be more detrimental to us. Now, I think, of course, wherever you have planets in your birth chart can dictate if Mars may be a little bit more aggressive, more malefic, if you will, rather than something that could be more favorable. But when I zoom out a little bit, all I'm saying is that the supportive energies coming from Uranus and Pluto are now going to be feeding the Libra part of your life too. So Pluto and Uranus have an opportunity to turn something on. I'm kind of getting a vision of like an old radio that's just been sitting in a garage forever. And out of nowhere, that old radio comes on and starts blasting some really awesome music. And imagine just the Libra part of your life just sort of being dormant since the eclipses, really. I mean, the last big thing that happened in Libra, I think, was a major eclipse, if I'm not mistaken, over the winter still, or was that in the fall last year still? Something like that. But Libra kind of has been like a little dormant aside from the lunar cycles, right? So we're having Mars in Libra being completely activated and turned on. The Libra part of our life is completely being activated and turned on, and now playing a part in the stories of the outer planet shifts that have been dictating and shaping some of the most intense transformations of our entire lives. Now, there's a few more things I want to talk to you guys about, of course. And I definitely want to bring in the first decan of Libra if I can today. Even though I don't normally track transits that are fast moving with decan work, I usually save that for lunation cycles because those are kind of more revealing and more potent seedings and revealings, new moons and full moons. But every now and then, just for the sake of education and just for the sake of exploration, I like to talk about the decans with transits such as this. So in just a moment, I will do that. But before I do, I would just like to say, if you're enjoying my content or enjoying this video, I would really appreciate if you can consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, all that other stuff. That really helps the channel's growth, my friends. And if any of you would like to connect with me for a personal reading, I would love to meet you. Links down below in my description box. You can go to my website and check out everything that I have to offer. But that being said, my friends, we're dealing with the first decan here of Libra when we talk about Mars ingressing into Libra. And the first decan of Libra is ruled by the moon. And this is ruled by the Two of Swords in the tarot. Now, what's interesting about this Mars ingress is that it will immediately ring it immediately rings true in my mind and my consciousness that decision making and decisions is a part of the story. So if you look on the world stage, people are constantly trying to make decisions on what is right, what is wrong right now. One thing I'm noticing in the news right now is that the stuff going on in Gaza, some are calling it a genocide. A lot of people in the Trump administration are now kind of coming out and finally like admitting that there's a lot of fucked up shit happening over there and that it's a horrific situation. Venus is now in Cancer, by the way, with Jupiter. So again, we are now talking about more spotlight on the Gaza situation. And again, I'm not trying to get political involving like what your belief is on like whether this is a genocide or not. But the point of the matter is the archetypes of Venus and Jupiter in the Cancer, the house of the home and family and nurturing and protectiveness. And we're dealing with humanity and human care, health care, the well-being of people. This is kind of right on time, okay, for there to be more conversation around, wow, we need to stop this hunger crisis. We need to stop this right now. Mars in Libra, we are now in another energy when it comes to diplomacy and figuring things out. How can we, Mars, get to the bottom of making massive decisions on how to solve problems in a real way? I have my feelings on the current administration in the United States, my friends. You know I do. And they're not so bright and they're not so positive, as many of you also know. But I do feel whoever is in power must be diplomatic and they must be doing their best to find the solutions to the problems at hand. And I think when Mars and Libra having this grand air trine, and we're dealing with a Two of Swords energy with this first decan, and we're dealing with the moon, okay? We're dealing with a softness in a more emotional sense with this first decan of Libra, where we are trying our best to find the harmony, find the emotional nature of this planet's energy. And Mars also being in a decan in which the Golden Dawn labeled a tarot card association of the Two of Swords with that, we are dealing with decisions. We are dealing with the beginning of making very big decisions that can have long-term effects. So navigating decision-making, making decisions, facing indecision and not knowing what to do. How do we get clear on decision making? This is kind of part of the story. Mental conflicts. Okay, so how are we navigating conflict in a more mental way? Okay, so we can't forget Libra's an air sign, very much about the mind, very much about intellect and thought and how we go about communicating, solving problems, making things okay, balance, diplomacy, all that kind of stuff. So having Mars in this first decan, while Uranus is in the first decan of Gemini, ruled by Jupiter, and that tarot card is associated with the Eight of Swords. So again, another card about mental imprisonment. So we have the first card of the sword suit, the Two of Swords, starting something very new with this Mars transit, but the feeding energy, the energy going to Uranus, is still in this place of mental entrapment, mental imprisonment. We needing to break free of mental limitations. And then Pluto in Aquarius, in that first decan of Aquarius, we're dealing with a Venus ruled decan and we're dealing with the Five of Swords. So again, navigating conflict still. So conflict is written everywhere when it comes to the transits at play. And I don't need to tell you this, my friends. I mean, even navigating transformation and change in our own life, this is really part of the story. I mean, life right now for a lot of us is all about navigating conflict and how are we reconciling this conflict, because this conflict is how we transform our lives. It's how we look at what's going on in our life and fix what is broken, or adding some medicine to what needs some triage. Okay. Now, Mars in Libra going opposite Saturn. Okay. This is really a moment where internal tension arises between what we are trying to manifest in the Aries part of our life. What are we trying to assert ourselves into that can really be formulating a whole new identity of self, to be quite honest, because Neptune is there really wanting us to dream something new into being. So again, aside from Mars being in a cardinal sign now, we're dealing with Saturn and Neptune activating a very big story in our life that is all about cardinal activation energy. So to believe it or not, the cardinal initiating energy is alive and well. I mean, even Jupiter in Cancer and Venus in Cancer right now, we are dealing with a massive beginning with a massive planet activating Cancer with Jupiter and now Venus transiting. But this opposition from cardinal Mars to cardinal Aries, right? Or cardinal Saturn and Neptune, they're both trying to start something new right now. And there is an internalized conflict battle happening from within. But what I'm trying to tell you all is that this is not a bad thing, because Mars and Saturn and Neptune are retrograde. And Mars now being in Libra is igniting a new story in which we also need to get started. The Libra part of our life needs to get on board with everything else going on in the birth chart, my friends, everything else going on in the sky involving this grand air trine for you and for the world. So Mars going opposite Aries, Mars going opposite Saturn, Neptune. This is, yes, a moment of tension. Yes, a moment of conflict. Yes, a moment where things might get delayed a little bit with Neptune and Saturn being retrograde. But how are we navigating the things going on in Aries that we are now a little confused over? Like, what are we working out right now? And Mercury during this ingress, by the way, Mercury is stationing direct in just a few days, but it is hovering retrograde, just hovering, not moving. It is still in the sky, like still as in not moving. It is motionless at 4 degrees retrograde during the time of this ingress. And the beginning days of this ingress before Mercury goes retrograde are going to be some of the ripest and thickest, involving the potency of pretty much everything I'm talking about today. And how mental breakthroughs, mental enlightenments, and just this triggering of awakening in a way of the Libra part of your life and what that Libra archetype represents, and how that puts us into this kind of realm of decision-making, indecision. How are we breaking free from here? How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to do this, that, and the other thing? This technically could be a war between ideals and reality, if you really think about it. So a war between, like, what are we imagining and what are we envisioning versus what is actually real and what is actually tangible, what is actually possible. Because right now we're going to be faced with that for August. And this grand air trine over the second week of August, August 7th, until the middle to late August, as Mars cruises past, it's the degree in which it makes all of this possible, these grand air trines and oppositions. This is really when we kind of have the potency of this kind of conflict between idealization and concrete reality. And how are we going to be pivoting our mental focus and our mental processes in certain directions for us to get clearer on some of the things that are going on in our life, So again, whatever's going on in Gemini, whatever's going on in Aquarius, Mars providing these trines, whatever's going on in Aries, Mars providing that opposition. These are the moments where more mental activations and mental decision-making and piercing through the veil of uncertainty and mental entrapments are very much part of the medicine that we need to start taking immediately, my friends. Now, on the world stage, I think we need to really acknowledge what's happening. And again, I don't really like dwelling too much on the world stuff, because, these outer planets are really just painting the picture of all that. And like every little transit that happens, we can't just be pointing fingers and just like calling things out left and right for world events, even though you totally can as an astrologer. But, for the world stuff, I really just want us all to realize that things happen in cycles, and rights are always corrected. I mean, wrongs are always corrected with rights. And I think we have to eventually just have faith in that. You know what I mean? And maybe this Mars ingress will provide something on the world stage that just makes things seem like, wow, I think there could be progress made, even if it feels like it's not totally here and now, but maybe something can be done to alleviate the pain or alleviate the, I don't know, just alleviate the weird craziness of certain things going on in the world. Now, in our own life, my friends, I always want you to know that we have to take inventory on what these transits are doing in our birth chart, what planets are being affected for you. Where is Libra in your life? Because Mars, yes, will still turn on the flame. Mars will still want to take action there. It just won't be able to do it in a way where, like it could where in Scorpio or Aries. This is more of a toned down Mars that is trying to get your attention. This is a Mars that wants you to navigate and balance its ability to assert itself. Mars needs to be balanced out right now. And Mars needs to communicate with other parts of your birth chart in a more balanced way. Now, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, my friends. I think that's really all I want to say today. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know what your thoughts, theories, and opinions are on this transit for yourself or for the world. I always love hearing your thoughts, and I always love reading your comments. So please leave me some comments. And yeah, I think that's all for this one, my friends. I don't really have any other announcements to make, aside from if you would like to connect with me for a reading, links down below. Yeah, and that's all I have for you guys. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.